Bonjour, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Megazins, Nindishinikas, Jangweshe, Nindudem, Marabimog, Nindunjiba. My Ojibwe name is Megazins, or Little Eagle, and my family is from the Mink clan in the town of Redby. My English name is Dan King, and I'm president of the Red Lake Nation College. I'm also very honored to be one of the 7 hereditary chiefs of the Great Red Lake Nation. We typically start out all of our Ojibwe events in the traditional way of positive energy and honoring with a song or a prayer. And to help us with that tonight, we have Fred Desjardins and Dallas Kingbird from the Anishinaabe Urban Culture Connection. So they will honor us to start off tonight in the right way with an honor song. Miigwech again. Thank you very much for that awesome honor song. all that practice and I forgot to press the on button for my, but anyways, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for our folks here in the room at the Minneapolis Embassy in downtown Minneapolis. And also thanks to you, our online audience. You know, our last James event we had over 15,000 views and a reach of over 30,000 people. Thanks to all of you. And tonight, we're projected to have an even larger audience. So we're very excited about this. But before I introduce James for our event tonight, we have some housekeeping items I wanted to just go through very quickly. And then we have some impressive news regarding Red Lake Nation College campus. So I want to share that with you tonight. First, the housekeeping. If you enjoyed our events with Red Lake Nation College online, please like us on Facebook and YouTube and follow us. We ask that you do that throughout the night. For those of you in the room, just like the movie theaters, please silence your phone and save your questions for later. You can type the questions in your mobile phone and we'll ask them later in the Q&A section. We are going to have our universal mute button on for you folks online. So if you're at home, don't worry, your noise there won't bother us. We'll have the universal mute button on for everybody. You just type your questions in the chat line if you want to ask that. And we love the participation, so we want everyone to participate online. If you're having trouble with YouTube, with Facebook, switch over to YouTube because that's some problem. People have problems with that, the technical problems. Just make that switch over on your own. It's going to be about a 45 to 50-minute program, followed by about 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A. So we will be done by 7:30 tonight. So then right at the very end, we're going to have a QR code survey that only take about 30 seconds, and we're going to ask everybody to help us participate. And then right at the very end of the night, James is going to do a final thought for us. So I wanted to give James the heads up that he'll give us one final thought to close off the night. So with that, we wanted to start by going to the next slide. So Devin, you want to try that? There you go. You can. There's our beautiful campus up in Red Lake. So this is our news of what's going on with Red Lake Nation College. So if you can flip to the next one, Devin. I want to tell you tonight about our Minneapolis campus update and some plans and architectural renderings of our new campus, and then also talk about spring term application. So you can flip to the next, Devin. So what we're providing here at our college is excellent education from a Native perspective. And like I always like to say, we're in the people business. So our whole goal as a college is to build people up with academic skills, pride in themselves, and job training skills, which we're going to be working on down at our Minneapolis campus. So all of this is with our Native values. And we do serve a unique market niche in higher ed. There's nobody else serving like us with a tribal college in the Twin Cities. We're actually going to be one of the first ones in the country to have a Native college in a big city. So this is pretty impressive. And our market is the other half of our tribe, Red Lake tribe, who lives in the cities, 8,000 members, and then 50,000 other natives who live in the Twin Cities, one of the largest urban centers in the country. And we'll be the only college to provide that education from a Native perspective. The history books got it wrong. They don't tell our story in those history books. We own this college. We're going to tell it from our perspective, from a Native perspective. So that's what you get when you come to our school. And we do practice what we call open enrollment. So all that means is all you need is a high school diploma or a GED to come to our school. We provide access and opportunity for Natives. And I think this is one of the best examples of tribal sovereignty. We're doing it right. We control it. We control our own destiny by controlling our education. So I'm very proud of our tribe for doing that. You can flip to the next one, Deb. Here's a little bit of our vision and mindset with this college. This is too important to fail, this education for us. Just like the state of Minnesota would never think of ending the University of Minnesota if they were having a tough year, right? They wouldn't say, oh, we're shutting down the U of M. Our tribe would never consider doing this. This is a permanent college that we're gonna have here in the Twin Cities. And when we were going through our accreditation, they said, Dan, do you guys have a 5 or a 10-year plan? I said, no, we have a 140-year plan. We think in terms of 7 generations. So we're gonna be here. We're coming down here permanently, and this is a family college. So you're not just a number if you come to our school. You get one-on-one personalized attention for every student. Average class is only 10 students. So you're gonna get a lot of help. And also we're looking for long-term community partners with the city, the state, University of Minnesota, private sector businesses, everyone. So we're looking to work with people and to be here for the long term. We have accreditation. The best accreditation you want is regional accreditation. There's 6 of these. The one in our area is the Higher Learning Commission, the HLC. We have that now. We have full accreditation. It took us 10 years to get it. So HLC covers 19 states, including Minnesota. You flip to the next one. So what does that mean? That means that we have the same high quality standards that we have to meet as all major universities in our region. And that includes Notre Dame. So we have the same accreditation as they do. You flip to the next one. And all of these great universities, University of Minnesota, we got the same exact accreditation as they do. What this also means is the accreditation, ease of transfer. We already worked out articulation agreements with all these schools so that there's no cost for our students to transfer. And when they want to transfer, they go, oh, you're from Red Lake Nation College? Your school already has an agreement with you. All those credits are transferring to this school. So we have articulation agreements. Here's 2 other big benefits that I think are awesome reasons why to come to our school. We offer no student loans. And then you don't want student loans. The average debt in this country for someone with a 4-year degree is $33,000. So we don't offer student loans. We offer grants. They're free. You don't have to pay them back. So what that means is almost all of our students graduate with 0 debt. They don't owe anything after 2 years. So that's a tremendous benefit for anyone to go on with their life or a young person starting their life. All students here will get a technology suitcase. And that includes a laptop, an Apple iPhone, and a hotspot, free internet. So all of our students have these tools so that they can succeed. And that's part of your whole tuition. So these are tremendous benefits for coming to our school. So now I want to tell you a little bit about our new campus. Red Lake Nation College, Minneapolis campus, opened up. We're here at the embassy. We're offering classes right now in this term. Starting in January, we're going to move to our new building, 900 South 3rd Street. And flip to the next one, Dev. And there's where it's located. Right across from US Bank Stadium, where the Vikings play. That little orange circle right there, 900 South 3rd. And that dotted orange line is the Metro Rail. So people can get there from Franklin, Cedar area, 3 to 4 minute ride right over the freeway. So it's a great location. The building on the left is the one we were originally interested in. We found out that the other 2 buildings were available. We bought the whole block. So we have that now. Flip to the next one. Here's what we're gonna do to it. We're gonna make it a big glass entry. The second level is gonna be a green roof. So you'll be able to go outside. There'll be trees and grass and everything. It's gonna be tremendous. About 25,000 square feet. There's the before and after photos. The before at the top. The bottom is what it's gonna look like when we're done with it. Flip over to the next. There's the before of that block in downtown Minneapolis. And then flip over to the next one. And that's kind of what it'll be. And those next couple photos are what the inside's gonna look like. It's gonna be 21st century learning, high technology, what's used in the business and in the real world today. It's not gonna be 4 walls and class and chairs lined up in nice rows. It's gonna be interactive, collaborative with high technology. So we picked architects who do this all the time, Cunningham Architects with native architects. So we're pretty excited about that. It's a fast track. We're going fast on this. We're already offering classes right now, so you could enroll Red Lake Nation College right now. The new campus on 900 South 3rd, we're going to start offering classes there in January 2022. And then the grand opening will be next fall, 2022, for the whole block will be finished. So we are going on a fast track. So you can apply right now. We have Shailene right here in the front row. Wave, Shy. So go and see Shailene or come and talk to us at our campus here and come and sign up. The only place you can get higher education from a Native perspective. And that's about it. And there's our website. Check it out for more information. All right. So now that everybody's coming to Red Lake Nation College, right? So now that you guys are coming here and online, the great thing is everything is high flex. So you can do it online or in person, almost all of our classes. All right. So next, I have the honor of introducing our speaker for tonight. And he is one of our favorite speakers and teachers here at the Red Lake Nation College. He's been a friend and a partner for us for several years now. And he's a respected teacher and educator in Indian country. And what I personally love best about James is that his positive energy. So James just radiates that, and everybody who knows him know what I'm talking about. He radiates that positive energy, and whatever knowledge he has, he freely shares that with everyone. And he's always trying to help people. He teaches in a kind, humble, and respectful way, which is what gravitates people toward him like a magnet. So the reason we like having James teach with us and share his knowledge is because everything he's about is the perfect embodiment of the 7 Ojibwe values, which are part of the foundation of our school. So everything we want to share and teach people, James is doing that. So that's why we have him with us. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our guest speaker for tonight, James Kaagegaabaw Vukelich. Yeah.
Aho, uju and denoi maganadok, anin, Kaagegaabaw Indigenous, Mikanak and Dudem, Mikanak wajuing and Dunjaba, Beshoga Kabakang and Danungom, Apajigomi Gwech, Beijayeg, Mino-wadash, Ginawa, Ganawabamieg, Mino-wadash Bizendaweg, Ingichi mi Gwechawendam, Jayanoma Nongom, Ingichi mi Gwechawendam, Jikakigurian, O Oma. Nongom. Engajaganashim guy, so I'll speak a little English as well. I said, hello, all of my relatives. My name is Kaagegaabaw. I'm Turtle Clan. I'm a descendant of Turtle Mountain. I live close to Minneapolis today. In fact, I lived here in Minneapolis, very close for the past 14 years. So it's always nice to come back to Red Lake Nation Embassy. It feels like visiting old friends, and they've been very kind to invite me to speak here tonight. And when I was thinking about this particular talk, I have to tell you, I was actually reticent at first. The last time I gave this particular keynote, I was in Sudbury, Ontario. It was an international keynote speech. And in the February 28th of 2020, I gave that talk to an auditorium filled with Anishinaabe from Ontario. And it would, in less than a week, everything would change in my life and for your lives as well. By the time I got back a week later, I got very sick. I had been traveling in international airports. And a schedule and a talk that I had spent the past 10 years developing had come to a grinding halt. And not only that, in that next year, I would not only become ill, I would become physically injured. I would have to go to a chiropractor 3 times a week. And people very dear to me passed on. My father would pass away and an aunt would pass away from cancer and COVID, respectively. And so to come tonight to speak to you about leading a good life, about seeking out that which is positive, and that which is beautiful in the lives that we've been given by Kaagegaabaw, by the kind spirit, at first felt I wanted to be authentic and I wanted to be truthful, and I didn't want to come and approach you all with toxic positivity. But as I began meditating upon this and pondering it, it struck me that, and for all of you out there watching, maybe these are the times when we need these teachings that have been passed down to us for millennia upon millennia. And with that, it made me think that, yes, I would be thrilled for this opportunity to speak to you all, because it has been an astounding year and a half. I am sure that I am not the only one who went through loss, who went through upheaval in their lives, who went through most likely sorrow, anxiety, and I'd love to share with you an Ojibwe perspective on this. And so tonight's talk, it's called Mino-bimaadiziwin, the good life, but I really think our ancestors would have looked at this as a verb, Mino-bimaadizi, Mino-bimaadizi. And this literally means he or she lives well, he or she leads a good life, he or she has good health. And it can mean all of these things. It's important to note that I think for our ancestors, this being a verb, so much of our language is verb-based. In fact, according to some studies, maybe 7/8 of the words that we would use on a daily basis would be verbs rather than nouns. So when we look at this, Mino-bimaadizi, I think it's really important that we observe this word, because for people all over the world, in spiritual traditions and religious customs, you have people seeking out moksha or mukti, liberation, nirvana, the kingdom of heaven, living in accordance with the Tao, leading the examined life. And for our ancestors, leading the good life was maybe the greatest achievement one could attain in our short lives here. So I think to look at what does this word really mean is incredibly important. And we can see here that it shows up with our sister languages, Mino-bimaadizi in Odawa and Budewatmi, the Potawatomi. They were, we call them sister languages. We were most likely one tribe at one time, speaking a common language. Over time, we move apart and our nations grow. We develop our own language and culture, as well as the Cree relatives of ours. In Northern Cree, it's Mino-bimaadiziw. In Plains Cree, it's Mio-bimaadiziw. Now, it takes a long time for one word to become a word in, here we have 6 different languages. It can take literally thousands of years for this to happen. So what we're looking at here is a concept that is not new. This is definitely pre-contact. And in fact, I think we could make the case that when Jesus was giving the Sermon on the Mount, when Buddha spoke of the Noble Eightfold Path, when Socrates was debating in the marketplaces of Athens, our ancestors were speaking of living a good life. And if we look at this word, bimaadizi, it's absolutely fascinating. Now, in Ojibwe, you can't just live. You have to live a certain way. And so we have atzi, which is a certain way of being. When we really break it down, it's a way of being, it's life, and in a particular condition. Here is from the late Jim Littlewolf. He drew a midday diagram, the path of life. Here you'll notice 4 hills. People from each stage of their lives, and this number 4 is very important. This will show up with Indigenous cultures all over the world. This first hill, the Abenugians, the infants, the babies, our next generation, the next cycle of life that you'll go through. It's the Abenugi of the children. The Ikwezanes, a girl, the Gwiwazanes, a boy. There's a special state of being in between being a child and becoming an adult. They would say Oshkinawe or Oshkinigikwe. Oshkinawe would be a young man, a new man. Oshkinigikwe would be a new woman. These are people who can physically start a family, but may not be ready for the awesome responsibility of that enterprise of feeding, of clothing, of giving shelter to the next generations who are coming. As you're going over that next hill, that third hill, you become an Inini or an Ikwe, a man or a woman. And if you are gifted with that precious gift of long life, you may actually become an elder. For people who are incredibly humble, Anishinaabe, to hear this term, Gichi Aya'a, a great being, this is someone who has received a magnificent gift from Kije Manadu, from the Spirit, the gift of old age, to become a Mindmuye, an old lady. And in English, I think that sounds kind of derogatory almost. In Ojibwe, it's quite beautiful. The respect is literally built into the language. It has in it the word minj, which is to hold. And the uye is the being. She's the being holding us all together. And when we look at our grandmothers, when we look at our great-grandmothers, when we look at the matriarchs in our society, look at your family. They're the ones holding our families together. They're holding our clans together, our villages, our towns together, and ultimately the nation. And then you have the Akiwenziak, the old men, literally those who come from the earth, who at a certain point in their life, having been fed, clothed, sheltered, healed, they realize that I am the earth and the earth is me. Whatever is going to affect the earth will affect me, and I too can affect the earth. Then ultimately, with Bimi, things will end. For Leonard Bloomfield, Bimi meant in a continuum. And the first time I saw that, it meant, that made sense. You're born, you'll go through these stages of life, and then ultimately, you'll pass on. You'll go on. Yet, when I first began learning the language, my language teacher took me to visit a Gete Anishinaabe. He would, I think the best translation for that would be an old-time Indian. This was someone who was born on a trapping line, in a lodge. He had, for the first part of his life, been fed and clothed and healed by the earth. And when we went to visit him as he was getting ready to pass away, my Ojibwe teacher said, you know, they had a word for this. They didn't use die in his day and age. They had a different term for it. It was giwe. He or she is going home. And when I looked at the translation of this word, it radically transformed it. It wasn't we're born, we live and we die. It was something spiritual. Our spirit is coming here to earth, having a human experience, and then returning home. He was speaking about something eternal. If I were to translate this word, bamatsi, it wouldn't just mean that he or she is alive. It is the eternal moving through the impermanent. We know that we have a beginning and an end, but that which animates us, that which gives us life, doesn't. It comes here, experiences being a human, and then returns home. So my next question became, well, what does Mino mean? What is it to be good? And I found this story describing the Benesi, the thunderbird, in Misiganabik, the giant serpent. And an elder in northern Ontario, in the northern part of Lake Winnipeg, described this story to an anthropologist in like the 1930s. And he described that Benesi and Misiganabik are engaged in this eternal struggle. And he described it that if the thunderbird does not hunt the giant serpents will overpopulate and take over the world, and it will become uninhabitable by anyone. However, if the giant serpents, Misiganabik, do not feed Benesi cannot exist. We'll starve. What I saw as conflict was actually the maintenance of balance. For him, this was Mino. This was peace. Here we can see other magnificent artists. The first one was Ojibwe Benesi, the late Norval Morrisseau. This is Carl Ray drawing this motif. Here's another version by Carl Ray. And in fact, when you look at the flag of our relatives to the south, here we have a serpent and a raptor. And so for him, good was the state of balance. What looks like conflict was actually balance. And so it struck me that Mino-bimaadiziwin would be the eternal moving through the impermanent in complete balance with all of our relatives, with our ecosystem, with our environment. Very much like this. So if I were to translate it, Minnow is well-being, but it's coming from balance. And when I saw where this word shows up in different words in our language, it really began to inform me how our ancestors sought out to lead a good life. You might notice that in the first part, we had 4 stages of life. Speaking to other people, they had 4 different components of our life. We have a mental component. We have an emotional component. We have a physical component. We have a spiritual component. So if we look at just being, well-being, peace, here we have Mino-bimaadiziwin. The first time I learned this translation, it was very unique, because when you learn Mino-bimaadiziwin in first year Ojibwe, it means I'm good, I'm fine. The Mino-bimaadiziwin, it is, you will learn this in the first couple of weeks. In fact, many of these words you will learn in the first couple of weeks of Ojibwe. Until I was actually teaching at University of Minnesota, and I received a Christmas card that was written in Ojibwe. And it said, Mino-bimaadiziwin Omaa King. And I thought, that's very curious. Does it really mean that? So I brought it next door to the world-famous linguist and asked him, does it really mean this? And he's like, yes, this is a very good translation. For what I had thought meant, I am good, I'm well, actually meant I'm at peace. My very being is in balance. And it's in that balance that I receive peace. It's in that balance that I receive well-being. To say on one way, in a conversational way, on Ajiayan, how are you doing? Nimanoya, I'm good. And spiritual perspective can mean my being is at peace. And that peace is coming from balance. And this one became very fascinating. This is another one. Minwendum, I'm glad. My thoughts and my feelings are in balance. And this aindom, if we're actually speaking about feelings and well-being, if we're talking about our emotions and our thoughts, these are inextricably interconnected, I think, in the language. We'll find a number of emotional terms that use this final aindom, which means thought. Ain is to think. Aindom is pertaining to thought. So here we can have my thoughts being in balance, but we also have thoughts that we have probably all experienced since the first week of March in 2020. One of the words that for me came to mind was Baba Mendum, anxiety. And to think about that word, we have Aindum, to think, and Baba, to go around, to hang around. Baba Mendum would almost be like a vicious circle of thoughts. To think about anxiety and then to feel anxiety coming from thinking about anxiety and not wanting to think about it and not wanting to think about it. You've thought about it. Your thoughts keep going around and around and around. And we can do that. We can chronically overthink our situations. We can chronically overthink our lives. And when that happens, the feeling of anxiety comes up, comes through. Another one, and I think we've all felt, probably Gashkaindamoin, sorrow. He or she is sad. When we would say it in first year Ojibwe, how are you doing? In Gashkaindam, I'm sad. Really, what that word means, though, is to feel cut off. That word part, gushk, it actually shows up in a word like this. Here's my tobacco pouch. Gushkibadagan is another way of saying that. And you'll notice how it can be open here. And I can seal it like this. It is closed off. The person who gave me this almost so many years ago is here in the audience. I'm really grateful for that. It's traveled with me all over. So the Gushkibadagan, it can be a pipe bag, it can be a tobacco bag. We're approaching Gushkadino Gizis in a few days, the freezing overmoon. If you observe the lakes when it begins to get cold, it'll freeze from the outside and it will then cover the lake. It'll Gushkadin, it freezes over. And this idea to feel sorrow means to feel cut off from people. You think you are cut off from your relatives. You think you are separated from them. And here's what is brilliant about this word and about the insights in this word. You can only think that you are separated from your relatives. You can't actually be separated from them. You are inextricably interconnected to them. You're inextricably linked to them. When I think of how many of us in the audience, people who are watching, have lost someone, people who have passed on, people who have gone home. There can be moments of true sorrow where you feel lost, where you feel separated, where you feel as if I will never be with this person again. That thought alone inspires sorrow. And speaking of first-year Ojibwe words, we have a teaching with that there is actually no goodbye in the Ojibwe language. We never say that. It doesn't, the concept doesn't exist. It's always gigawabaman. I shall see you again. I shall see you again. And that spirit, which is eternal, from an Ojibwe perspective, from an Ojibwe worldview, that if I do not see you in this life, I'll see you in the next. In some of these teachings, you'll have people who don't feel sad when people have left. They know that there will be another time that I'll see you, that I am not connected from you. I can only think that I've been disconnected from you. I can only think that I'm separated from you. And when you think of depression, when you think of sorrow, and it really comes on strong, you can feel, we close up. When someone passes away, when we're really feeling sadness, we can close off ourselves to our relatives. I recall when I first really understood this teaching, it was dealing with the loss of my mother-in-law. Often people will joke about, oh, my mother-in-law, but my mother-in-law was an exemplary human being. She was a truly beautiful person. She had a great deal of care and affection, not just for me, but for everyone that she seemed to have any interaction with. And in one of my worst years and just feeling sorrow about it, I recall hearing a poem from Rumi. He's a Sufi poet. And he said that, I see now that goodbyes are only for those who love with their eyes. Because for those who love with their heart and their soul, there is no such thing as separation. And when I became present with the love I had for her, not thinking about our great times, not imagining in the future the times we would not share, but when I was totally present, that love, one of our grandfather teachings, one of our sacred laws, one of our eternal laws, the moment I was able to be present with it, it was as if she had not gone. I'll try to get through this next part. I recall saying, you had been with me all along. I was the one who didn't know. I had missed you so much. And I really began to understand those Ojibwe teachings with it. So the moment I understood that, I was no longer dwelling with anxiety, thinking about thinking. I knew I couldn't be closed off. And so there was the decision to be made with Minwaindamoin. You may notice that some of our ancestors have poker faces when their pictures are being taken. We called it the Edward Curtis look, very stoic. But really, these are people who probably know true joy. Their state of being is not bossed around by their emotions, by their thoughts. Their thoughts are in balance. And in that balance comes true joy. That's the environment in which joy flourishes. And so we will have these times in our life where we feel nishkatswin, rage, shingendamoin, hatred, gashkendamoin, sorrow, papamendamoin, anxiety, zegizawin, fear. But we will ultimately have a choice. Do we dwell in that state, or do we choose to acknowledge we're feeling that way and then reach for balance in our thoughts? And some people you may note in your life may have feelings that are greatly elated, excitement, joy, and then moments later can crash into anger, into sadness, into fear. We call it like bipolar. Two different ends. Here we're talking about equanimity, being in balance with our thoughts. And you may note that too, with your thoughts, there may be times where you may actually remember something that someone said, and then you think about it, and then you think about it again, and then you think about it again. And as you keep thinking about it, you may get more angry. You may get more frustrated. You may get more sad. The more you chronically overthink it. But to be able to realize you're doing it, let it go. You'll have peace and balance in your thoughts. The physical part. Mino-manji owen. Mino-manji, I feel good. My body feels good. I have good health. Now, this is an incredibly important part of having balance in our lives. We're going to need balance in all of these areas in order for us to have a good life. Now, each one of us is unique, but there are particular laws with the human body that if you break them, like, you will pay the price. And then realize that, I have to seek out balance in my diet. We know that a high sugar, a high fat diet, a diet with a lot of sodium in it, will wreak havoc on your system. We know that something sacred, like a sema, like tobacco, can be used occasionally. You can use this in balance. Yet if you smoke a pack a day for at least a couple of decades, and I can state I too did that one point in my life, that it may bring cancer to you if you do not have peace and balance in your life. We can even see something like opiates. For someone coming out of a very invasive, very powerful surgery like a hip replacement, that if you are able to stay in front of the pain, you will heal quicker. Yet, if you have imbalance in your life and you are using opiates, if you're using alcohol, if you're using methamphetamine to have that feeling of balance, it will wreak havoc in your life as well. So we can seek out balance with how we interact, with our diet, and with exercise too. Our lifestyles have changed a lot in the past 100 years. A friend of mine he's one of the finest Ojibwe translators I've ever spoken to. And he was doing research in, again, northern Canada, and was talking with people who at one point in their life ate a lot of bread, in like the 1930s and 1940s would eat a lot of salted pork, a lot of bacon, would put sugar in their tea. But he noticed in their lifestyles it was different. These were people who were carrying 30, 40-pound moose legs on their backs through 15 miles of bush. They were paddling in canoes for miles a day. They were working all day from dawn until evening. And with that kind of lifestyle, they were able to have bread, they were able to have carbohydrates, they were able to have sugar. And with that kind of exercise, it was fine. When we've moved into a more sedentary lifestyle, and I know I have too, I've spent a lot of monitor time where we're not as active as we used to be, then we need to absolutely have exercise in our life. And that may not even be going to the gym. That could be canoeing. That could be snowshoeing. That could be walking. Then we'll say walk. How important that is. And, you know, that would also take a lot of self-love to do that. And you'll need this. For me, this is the spiritual component of how we lead our good life. Minose. And this can mean a couple of different things. One, it can mean things are going well, you have good fortune, you have good luck. We have Mino in it again. And the say, I also think can mean to walk. You are walking along the path of life in a good way. You're walking in a way that brings balance to your friends and relatives, to your environment. You're acting in a way that brings peace and balance to all of your relatives. And when you do that, here is another word I found for kindness, for generosity, and it also had Mino in it. Mino de'e. He or she has a good heart. The very center, the very core of our being is in balance. And in that balance, the natural consequence of that is kindness. This is generosity. And you're going to need this if you're really, truly going to embark on a spiritual life. So, you know, when we think about Mino-bimaadiziwin, Mino-bimaadiziwin, if we are all related, and I am all of my relatives, and all of my relatives are me, then in a truly spiritual way, we would rarely pray for ourselves. We would rarely ask for things for ourselves. What we would do is ask for things for our relatives. Here we have Mino-gijigat. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And the moment you have that kindness in your heart, that love for your people, our old word for people like that who defended our nation as well as who prayed and did ceremony for our nation were Okechida or Gechidakwe, the warriors. And you will need not just a kind heart, but you will need a strong heart to be able to pray for people. So you would never, again, pray for yourself. This is part of when I use a sema, when I meditate and when I ask for help nightly with my tobacco. These are the words I use. And when I do my pipe ceremony, you would never ask for all of these things for yourself. However, the Ogechida at the drum, at the Dewe Egan, with the asema, with the tobacco, with the opwagan, with the pipe in the lodge, is asking for all of his or her relatives in the east, in Wabanong, in Shawanong, in the south, in Ningabianong, in the west, in Kiwetanong, the north. For all of those relatives, all of them. I pray, that you have peace and well-being. I pray that you all have good health. Begish Sigo Jimin Wayne to make. I'm praying, I'm wishing, I'm hoping that your thoughts and your emotions are in balance so that you may know true joy. And Begish Sigo Jimin Osayek. I am praying that you all walk along the path of life in a good way, in a way that brings peace and balance to all of your relatives. Now, if you are praying for everyone in the east, in the south, in the west, and in the north, you're not just praying for your children, for your cousins, for your aunts and uncles, for your family members, for your communities. You are also praying for people who may be engaged in violence, who may be engaged in addictive activities, who may be sowing discord and disarray in their communities, who may be trafficking humans or narcotics. And what the Ogichida is actually doing there, with Zungideo and with strength of heart, is saying that if you did have peace, if you did have thoughts that were in balance so that you had true joy, if you had good health, and if you were walking along the path of life in a good way, you would not act this way. You would not treat your relatives this way. You would not be engaged in these activities. Now, we know that we can't make anyone change. However, when they make that decision, that I have changed my life, because you can Ojibwe, you can transform your life, that when you do, that someone who you may have never have spoken to, you may have never have seen, talked to, or visited with, can say, I too ask for your health, for your joy, for your peace, and that you walk along the path of life in a good way. What I could do as an Ogichida is ask on your behalf, ask the Creator, ask the Manaduk, ask the spirits on your behalf that you lead this good life. And when you can do that, you can truly say that, Minogishigat, it is a good day. It is a good day. This is one of those words that you learn in first year Ojibwe. And the first time I learned it, it was Ani Nejewebak, what's the weather like outside? And my teachers all told me that you can always say, Minogishigat, Minogishigat, it is a good day. Today we'd say Owanabisa, it's misty, Ningwakwad, it's cloudy, Dakiaya, it's cool, but Idash, Minogishigat, it is a good day. The Spirit has given us is a day to be grateful for. And when you have that kind of gratitude, Miigwechawendum is to he or she is grateful, he or she has thanks. And I thought Miigwechawendum one would be gratitude. And when we think of the gratitude that I felt this morning, that I felt to have an opportunity to speak to you all, was that I woke up this morning. When I looked at some of the prayers of our ancestors, the Akiwenziak, the old men, the Mindemoyek, the old women, getting up, probably like many of you, with the sun, watching the sun rise. In a planet filled with billions of people, there were literally millions of people who did not wake up this morning. Tomorrow there will be millions of people who will not wake up. And when our ancestors woke up with their asema, with their tobacco, their first thing was to say, Miigwech, was to give thanks, was to ask for help to lead their life in a good way. Miigwech, Imashomas, Gapi Wasakondemaoyan. Thank you, grandfather, for shining on me, literally thanking the sun for light. Thanking grandmother for breath, for air, for oxygen. Acknowledging all of their relatives in each one of the directions. And with that kind of gratitude, that can radically transform your life. It can radically transform it. And in transforming our lives, and in seeking out a good life, we have to acknowledge that we're inextricably interconnected to our relatives. There's a word that I love that shows up in this slide, in Danako Bichigan. When we translate it, it can mean my ancestor, my great-grandparent, or my great-grandchild. If you were to logically use that word, if it means my great-grandparent and my great-grandchild, you have in it implied 7 generations. And when we look at what that word really means, anako, it means I am inextricably interconnected to you. I am inextricably connected to you. When we seek out a good life, when we seek out a life of peace and balance, when we seek out a life without conflict with our relatives or our environment, we seek out a life without contradiction, saying one thing and then doing another, seeking out a holistic life, a holy life, then I have to propose this to you. If you are interconnected with all of your relatives, and you are all of your relatives, if you truly change yourself, will you actually change your relatives? That is the only way we can truly transform the world we live, is by seeking out a good life. And we won't just be creating an environment of peace and balance for our relatives now. Think of those who we are inextricably interconnected to, our great-grandchildren. What example will we leave them? As well as, let's think of our ancestors. That's a linear way of thinking about the future. If we're still inextricably interconnected to our relatives, we can transform the lives or the story and the legacy of people who are no longer here with us. Our ancestors. Those who faced the full force of and brunt of colonization, loss of spiritual freedom. They're related to one another. And when we do it, I know we have, in this past year and a half, gone through a great deal of loss. The people we hold dear to us have passed on. For many of us, our jobs have transformed. There may be feelings of great loneliness to not be able to visit, to socialize, to see people we hold close to our hearts. Yet, I would say that despite that, we have opportunities to feel true joy, to feel true gratitude for the lives that we've been given, for the opportunity to seek out the good life. I've heard remarkable stories from all over the world. Someone like Viktor Frankl, who in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany had moments where I actually felt joy despite the circumstances he was in. There are stories of Tibetan monks who, having spent 20 years in a Chinese prison, living every day with the threat of death, with that uncertainty, and saying, after their release, after 20 years of their lives, 20 winters, saying that their only fear was losing compassion for their Chinese captors. And when I think of the people who taught me Ojibwe, of the elders I have met in my life, people who went through an extraordinary loss of land, who went through a loss of family with the boarding school and residential school area, who went through abuse there, who had to endure spiritual prosecution, persecution from merely practicing a way of life that had been passed down for thousands and thousands of years. And of course, facing ugly and terrible racism at a great portion of their life, who, when I spoke to them, were actually happy, had joy. The circumstances that surrounded their lives had not dictated terms to them. They had sought out a good life. And it showed me that in seeking out the good life, they were displaying to me in those moments the indomitable nature of the human spirit, the Anishinaabe spirit, how important that is. And more importantly, they had made the decision. No one could do it for them. No one could make them do it. They chose to seek out a life of joy, of health. They sought out a life of good physical health, as well as peace and balance within themselves, despite their surroundings, despite their circumstances. And in seeking out the good life, we know that we can look at the emotional, the mental, the physical, and the spiritual part. But when we're truly seeking out the good life, you ask yourself, well, how do we do that? We seek out a life with descendent, with truth, with descendent, with humility, where we unite ourselves above our relatives, truly humble, with Mino-bimaadiziwin, with respect for one another, to acknowledge the sanctity and the sacredness of our relatives' lives, with Zagitiwin, with that compassionate, unconditional love, with Zungideewin, with strength of heart, with great courage, with bravery, with Kaagegaabaw. A life where our actions and our words and thoughts are in alignment with each other. A life of honesty, a holistic life, a holy life, and ultimately acting with wisdom, with intelligence, with vision. And in seeking out this good life, then we'll truly have peace and balance. We'll have good health. We'll truly lead a life worth living. On that note, I'd like to say, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for listening, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about these teachings that were, for me, on a personal note, totally transformative. It totally showed me a way to seek out a life worth living. So miigwech, that's all. Thank you.
All right, miigwech, James. Appreciate that. Well, now we're going to go into the time where we allow some questions, and we take questions from the audience, either here in person or our folks online. So we'll give our presenters a moment to get that ready. There we go. Is it back on? Okay. All right. So that QR code, we will be doing that survey right at the very end. So we'll take a few questions, I think, and then after a few questions, we'll let James do a final thought for us tonight. And so I'm not sure if you had a couple questions. Are there a few questions up there? Okay. All right. Angela from Red Lake is on Facebook, and she asked, James, what do you do in your free time? So James, he wants you to come on up.
Okay,
You can,
good. Great.
they want to know about James.
Yeah. Bonjour. Bonjour, Angela. From Red Lake. Well, this past year and a half, with the transformation of my lifestyle, I've really enjoyed hanging out with my son. I have been grateful for that. I have the hope that in 10 years from now, I will look back at when my son was a 6-year-old, I got to spend 18 months with him. So we love to go biking. He loves to skateboard. I love to watch him do that. We go hiking. We live on a lake, so we've had a chance to go swimming and paddleboarding. Those are some of my favorite things. I also love cooking with my wife. I love grilling. And of course, studying Ojibwe. I do this on a daily basis. So this is something that I'll have a commitment to, or something that I make that time for myself because I really enjoy it. Miigwech.
Okay, I can.
Yeah, should we do it from right here?
Oh, we had a question in the room. Okay, here we go. Yeah.
Quick question, Jim. How much is a paddleboard guy?
Yeah, I got mine from Costco. Yeah. And so, it's been surprisingly fun. It is just to be on the water. And like I got what our ancestors were doing, canoeing, just being there, there is a peace when you look around you and you're surrounded by the Nibi, by the sacred water. It's really good.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. Is my mic okay? I seem to be off on my mic tonight. Okay, looks like Alina from Facebook asked, Kaagegaabaw, have you held these talks with boarding school survivors? And specifically, what was the reaction? Good question.
It's a great question. You know what? Rather than have I had the talks with them, they are the ones who taught me this. They're the ones who taught me this. And many of them actually struggled through parts of their life. And they've documented their stories. Many at some times in their life have struggled with addiction, with rage, with alcoholism, with everything terrible that came out of surviving the residential and boarding school era, and how they were able to heal was through this. So, and that, one of my teachers, it was so important to see finding balance through observing yourself, through spiritual practice, through meditation, to be able to transform your life. And not to talk about it, but to watch their example. It was a lived example. It wasn't something that was, no dissertation was written about it. They showed by living that way. Their lives were the example. And for me to have that opportunity to try to pass that on to the generations who are coming I'm incredibly grateful for that. Thank you, Alina. That was a really great question.
Okay, our next question was from Sheila from Facebook and said, how much time do you commit to learning the language and what suggestions do you have for new learners?
Great. Well, it's a part of my life every day. I'm fortunate that I feel like I'm at a position in my life where I don't have to refer to the dictionary as much to be able to read some books that are literally written in the language is wonderful. So today I was actually reading Anishinaabe Dewa Igan by Obazan and reading his beautiful Ojibwe. And I noticed that all of a sudden an hour had passed by and I was reading it out loud because I love the sound of the language. So I would do that. What would I suggest? So usually at least an hour That's my own personal preference. I try to have that for exercise, again, for mental prayer or for intellectual pursuits. That's how much time I like to commit to the language. For language learners, it has to be something that you'd use on a daily basis. And that would be the same if it were Mandarin Chinese, if it were High German, if it were Spanish or Italian or French. It would be something you would have to use on a daily basis. So that would be one of my suggestions for new learners, is keep it in your life and also make it fun. Don't get too down on yourself if you don't become a fluent speaker very quickly. And if you can learn to enjoy reaching for it, you can learn to enjoy studying, learn to enjoy acquiring language, then you'll learn something every day for the rest of your life. So that would be my suggestion. Miigwech.
Okay, great, James. Yeah, we got about 4 or 5 more questions. Julie from Facebook asked, can you talk about spirit names and how do you get them?
There can be a number of ways to get them. I think the traditional way would be offering tobacco to someone who has received the gift to give an Anishinaabe-Wiinziwin. I had the privilege of actually giving a presentation with one of the world's leading linguistic experts in the language, where we had a chance to talk about the linguistic implications in spirit names. Because there are so many teachings that we're carrying just in our names alone. So to offer someone who has been given the right, who's had the vision or has had the dream to bestow on Anishinaabe-Wiinziwin, an Indian name, if you will, an English translation to someone, is how you would do that. So miigwech.
Miigwech, James. Tammy from Bagley is watching on YouTube, and she asked, do you know any other languages personally?
I've had the chance to study a good many of them. I, at one point, was fluent in French. I spoke some Italian. I studied Latin in middle school, and during my linguistic days, I studied Plains Cree, Michif, Swampy Cree, Moose Cree, Shawnee, Wampanoag. Anytime I could find languages that were related to our sister language Ojibwe, it was something I absolutely loved doing. So,
okay, great.
miigwech.
Yeah, 2 more. Ashley from Minneapolis on YouTube said, and this is kind of related to what you talked about a little, James, and I have a question for you on this too, because it really struck me personally what you were talking about, is somebody struggling with grief, and they appreciated your insights on grief. So what advice do you find to comfort people using the language? Great comment and question.
That really is. And this one, again, this was looking at the language and the culture and looking at, like, what did that word sorrow mean for me? What did that word grief mean? When we look at the grieving process, it'll move. I wonder if you've all noticed that there's been a motif with 4s. We've had 4 directions. We have 4 stages of life. 4 ways of being, if it's emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental. 4 seasons. And, you know, when we look at the grieving process, it can be the first 4, one of the 4, would be like 4 days, where you have that funerary, right? Where we can really, like, feel the full onslaught of grief of missing someone. Even physically, that person is, we don't feel them next to us anymore. We don't hear them. We don't see them. We don't have a chance to embrace them. So for those 4 days, that can be very, very trying. And there's that first 4 months, a season, where you will feel that, and you'll begin the healing process. From those 4 months, it'll move into 4 seasons. you'll have a year and you'll notice that with the number of funerary rites and grieving ceremonies, there'll be a year later. They'll begin wiping away the tears, and then it will be 4 winters. 4 years later, where maybe the body begins healing from that person's loss. But something powerful I learned from listening to old men, from speaking to people who grew up with the culture and with the language, was that teaching of Kaagegaabaw, that these people, you may think that they are gone, but because you don't see them does not mean that they're not with you. And using that eternal teaching of love, for me, that was the transformative part. Again, when I was talking about Minwaindom and Aindom, thought, I wasn't dwelling in the past. I wasn't anxious about the future when I was there and present with love. And love, when it's true, when it's genuine, when it's authentic, it's now. When I could feel that now, that person was not separated from me anymore. That feeling of love hadn't changed at all. And I'm floored and astonished and amazed that our ancestors knew that. That they knew that you will have a grieving process. You will feel this sorrow. But we have a way through our traditions, through our spiritual practices to heal you. And then if you can remember that teaching, then you'll never really be separated from that person. Or they may no longer be here.
Yeah, that was great, James. Yeah, that kind of struck it with me too. When you were talking about that, I was thinking about the people in my life that I've lost, and everybody here in the audience, everybody at home has some people very close to us that we've lost, and that concept that you talked about, that gives you peace, knowing that you're going to see them someday, that there is no goodbye, really. And so once we accept that, that does give us a little more peace and less anxiety. So that was just perfect the way you talked about that. So anyway,
Thank you.
oh, we had another question.
Okay, my question is, goes to, our names. I was in class one day and Earl was our instructor, and me and Tony were students of his, and he asked a question. He says, why don't we share our Indian names? And so we went around the room and told him what we thought, but he never answered that question. He just let the students answer that question. So today, we introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
But back in the day, I suppose a small community. My daddy's from Fremont.
Mhm.
He's the one who told me about that. Sharing your name.
There's been transformation over, like, literally the hundreds of years since, the first published Ojibwe text, I think, is in 1642. So we've been writing about our language and our culture for some time. And some of the missionaries and then anthropologists or voyageurs would have a hard time getting with someone's name, because in the lodge, you were related to everyone in the lodge and you had a place in the lodge. So they would say, well, what's this person? He'd be like, that's my cousin. In that relationship, that was his name, my cousin. That's my uncle. And they'd say, well, what else is he called? And he's like, oh, he's the one who sits here, because in a lodge where they loved order, like, everyone had their own place, and then, well, what's another way of saying it? And they were, oh, he is this clan. He is, and then ultimately we all have a name. We're all Anishinaabe. But as things have changed over the years, you notice that, yeah, people are using their names. There's a great amount of knowledge and spiritual tradition that's embedded in the names themselves. And something, as I learned, learning about the names, and when we did this presentation, was that if you're by your namesake, you should probably use your name. Then, and the names, they're spiritual. They have spirit attached to them. They should be feasted. They should be acknowledged and thought highly of, because that's how the universe is relating with you, is that one, that person.
Great. Beautiful comment, too. Yeah, Jim from Ontario, who was on Facebook, said, "Where did you acquire your knowledge on balance from?" He thought that was beautiful.
Miigwech. I did too. And again, this was from some anthropological work that was done in like the 1920s and 1930s with fluent, mostly monolingual speakers. For example, that account with the thunderbird and the giant serpent came from there. But even today, when you speak to people in the community, knowledge keepers, elders, the emphasis is on balance, equanimity. And it's something that's not unique to Anishinaabe. You'll find this all over the world of people seeking out balance. But when we think of it and we strive for it and we keep it in our thoughts, that this is something I should try to do on a daily basis, is not just have balance in myself, but if I have balance in myself, I'll bring that to the community. We can truly, truly find peace there. Miigwech, Jim, I appreciate that.
Okay. It looks like one more question. This is the last question. Was from Angie in North Dakota on Facebook, who said, "I've heard that if you did not grow up with the language, you miss out on understanding it fully." She's asking, do you think that's true?
If you are just maybe taking a course and you've learned some vocabulary words and then you can recite those vocabulary words, there may be some understandings that you don't get out of the language. However, I think like so many people in my generation, at least, and most likely my mom's generation, even my grandmother's generation, who were second language learners, who had to come back to the language after going to boarding school, after going to residential school, that with study, with meditation, with making it a lived experience, then you can, I think, have true insight into what the language is actually trying to pass down to us. So.
All right, Miigwech, James.
Miigwech.
All right, well, we're at the point now where we're gonna ask James to give us a final thought. And then after that, we'll do a quick QR survey with everybody in your cell phone. So keep your cell phones handy. So I'll turn it over to James to give us a final thought.
In closing tonight, I think the most important part I can get across is that with everything that we've had a chance to discuss, with the beauty that's in the language and the culture and the history and the spirituality, that the language and the culture and the history and the spirituality can't do it for us. It cannot lead our lives. It can give us life, but it can't live our lives. We will reach a point where we have to make a decision. And these choices, we can think on a daily basis, are non-consequential, insignificant. But what I'm asking you all to ponder is to consider that each one of your choices, each one of your decisions, each one of your actions is going to affect someone you will never see, you will never visit with, you'll never speak to, listen to, or hold. Every single thing we do, every decision we make is going to affect someone 7 generations from now. And that the decisions we have to make on a daily basis are important. And that we have very important decisions to make when it comes to our thoughts, when it comes to our emotions, how that will affect all of our relatives. We have very important decisions when we decide what we want to eat, if we choose to exercise, what kind of diet we want, if we choose to escape life using intoxicants, or if we choose to fully embrace it. We have incredibly important decisions to make with our well-being, with our peace. And we have opportunities to choose joy, to choose to walk along the path of life in a good way. That's a choice. Now we know if we don't make a decision, if we ignore it, things will continue the way they've been going. But if we do choose to lead a life that has balance, that has peace in it with our physical being, with our mental being, with our emotional being, with our spiritual being, and if we choose to truly lead a life with Tebwewen, with truth, with Kaagegaabaw, with virtue, with righteousness, with honesty, with Zagietiwin, that compassionate, unconditional love for one another, with Dabasendizuan, with humility, with Manajietiwin, with respect, with Zungideewin, having the strength of heart, the courage to lead this life, to make these decisions that are so important. We will make decisions that are enlightened. We will make decisions that have vision, decisions with wisdom, with Nibwakawin. And although we may never meet these people, we know we will have treated someone coming 7 generations from now in a way that brings peace and balance to them. And in doing that, we'll ask that for all of our relatives. So, mi ie kidoyan. That's all I'll say. And miigwech ginawa. Thank you.
All right. Great, James. Awesome. Great job. All right, let's give it up for James, you guys. It was awesome. Excellent. Appreciate that. Very thought-provoking. Good final thought for the night. And if you're like me, I know you folks in the room and at home, James always gives you thought-provoking things to think about, and really it kind of makes you go inward a little bit. And I think we all need to do that from time to time. So I appreciate coming again tonight, James. Excellent job as always. And we're trying to get James as a permanent instructor at Red Lake Nation College. So maybe by next fall, I think hopefully his schedule opens up. But until then, we want to keep doing these maybe every couple months. So you'll probably be seeing James again. But now we're at the point where we wanted you to, we'll put up on the screen the QR code. So just put your phones on there if you can right now. And then just get your camera out and point it there, and then you'll see a little yellow link, and just press on that link, and that'll take you to a survey. Only takes about 30 seconds. And like I mentioned, your comments, your feedback is very important to us. We're trying to make these online events bigger and better every single time. So we got speakers like James. We had speakers about the boarding schools, and we're looking at different topics to have speakers about in the future. So just go ahead and fill that out. Make your comments. If you can write a few, even a 1-sentence comment in there right at the end, feel free to do that. And go ahead and do that. Give us your feedback. And if you can, follow us on Facebook and YouTube and like us. And I think we're over 4,000 followers now on Facebook. So we're continue to grow, and we want to keep this up and keep offering more of these opportunities. And if you want to go to our rlnc.edu website, you can learn more about our campus. And if you got any questions, call Shailene at the Student Success, and she'll help you out. All right, so check that out. And once again, everybody, we'll leave that screen up for a while, and this will be recorded on Facebook and YouTube. So you can go watch it anytime later. We'll post it up. And so feel free to watch it then. All right. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. And miigwech. Good night.